The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly 3 kilometers in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it, drifting between the massive pillars that held up the ancient structure. Representatives from 850 species filled the curved rows of seats, their bodies ranging from insect-like creatures no larger than a human hand to massive beings that required specially reinforced platforms to support their weight. At the center of it all stood High Chancellor Vethmaker, his forearms raised in the traditional gesture of authority. His scaled skin shimmered under the artificial sunlight that poured through the transparent dome above. Behind him, a holographic display showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth. "We have tolerated this primitive species for too long," Vethmaker announced, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the hall. "They spread like a disease. They ignore our boundaries. They refuse to accept their place in the natural order of things." A wave of agreement rippled through the assembled representatives. Clicking sounds, deep rumbles, high-pitched whistles, and 100 other forms of approval filled the air. Ambassador Chen Weilin sat in the small section reserved for humanity's delegation. It was positioned at the very back of the hall, far from the center of power, barely visible to the main assembly. This was deliberate. Humanity had been assigned this insulting location from the very first day. They were granted observer status nearly 2 centuries ago. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of many years spent in careful negotiation. Her expression remained calm as she listened to the Chancellor's words. But beneath that calm surface, something stirred. Their expansion into the Kepler corridor cannot be ignored. Vethmaker continued. 3 colony ships, 15,000 humans, all in direct violation of the restriction accords. The restriction accords. Chen almost laughed at those words. The accords that kept humanity trapped in a tiny corner of their own arm of the galaxy. The accords that prevented human ships from traveling at speeds faster than what the Council deemed appropriate for their developmental stage. The accords that treated humanity like children who needed to be watched and controlled. "I move for military intervention," declared Representative Kethvorin of the Velith-Eni Empire. He was a tall being with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with inner fire. The Velith-Eni were the military arm of the Council, their fleet the largest and most powerful in known space. When they spoke of war, the galaxy listened. "The motion is recognized," Vethmaker replied. "All those in favor of authorizing military action against the human homeworld, signal your consent." The voting lights began to appear across the massive hall. Green for yes, red for no. Chen watched as the display filled with green lights, like stars appearing in a night sky. 847 species voted yes. 3 abstained. None voted against. The hall erupted in sounds of celebration. After 2 centuries of dealing with the troublesome humans, the galaxy would finally put them in their place. Chen stood slowly. No one noticed. No one ever noticed the human ambassador unless they wanted to mock her or remind her of humanity's inferior status. She walked out of the hall with measured steps, her face still showing nothing. Behind her, the representatives were already discussing the details of the coming war. How many ships to send? Which admiral would have the honor of commanding the fleet? Whether to simply bomb the human colonies back to the Stone Age, or to make a proper example of Earth itself. The corridor outside the Great Hall was empty. Chen stopped and reached into her pocket, pulling out a small communication device that looked outdated compared to the technology around her. She pressed a single button. "This is Ambassador Chen," she said quietly. "It's time." There was a brief pause, and then a voice responded. It was calm and professional, with just a hint of something that might have been satisfaction. "Understood, Ambassador. We've been waiting a long time for this." Chen allowed herself a small smile as she ended the transmission. Then she returned her face to its neutral expression and continued walking. She had a report to write and evacuation procedures to pretend to activate. The theater had to be maintained for just a little longer. Back on Earth, the message reached the Central Command bunker buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. General Marcus Stone read the 2 words on his screen and felt his heart rate increase for the first time in decades. "It's time." He turned to face The room full of officers and analysts who had been preparing for this moment their entire careers. Their parents had prepared for it. Their grandparents had prepared for it. 7 generations of humanity had worked in secret, building and hiding and waiting for the galaxy to make this exact mistake. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stone said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "Operation Long Sleep is over. Begin activation of all assets. The Council has just declared war on humanity." No one cheered. No one celebrated. There was only quiet efficiency as orders were sent, and systems that had been dormant for decades began to wake up. In orbit around Earth, satellites that had been dismissed by Council scouts as primitive communication relays received their activation codes. Deep within their cores, technology that the galaxy had never seen began to hum with power. Across the Sol system, ships that appeared to be simple cargo transports and mining vessels received the same codes. Hidden compartments opened. Weapons that had been designed to remain invisible to every known form of scanning came online. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, beneath the ice of Europa, and the methane lakes of Titan, entire facilities that had never appeared on any galactic survey began to stir. Millions of tons of equipment that had been built in secret over the centuries started their power-up sequences, and on Earth itself, in secret locations scattered across every continent, the soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment received their orders. They were not surprised. They had known this day would come. They had been promised it would come. The Velethani Empire assigned 12,000 warships to the Earth expedition. It was considered excessive by many in the Council. Humanity had only a few hundred ships capable of interstellar travel, and those were slow and poorly armed by galactic standards. Their weapons were primitive chemical explosives and simple energy projectors. Their defenses were laughable. Admiral Keth Voran himself would lead the fleet. It was an honor he had sought for decades, ever since his first encounter with the strange species from the small blue planet. He found them fascinating in a disturbing way. They were so physically weak, so short-lived, so limited in their natural abilities, and yet there was something in their eyes that made him uncomfortable. Something that watched and calculated and waited. He dismissed the feeling as superstition. Humanity was simply another primitive species that had developed faster than expected. It happened occasionally. Such species needed to be reminded of their place before they caused problems for the established order. The fleet gathered at the staging point in the Deneb system, ships arriving from across the Empire over the course of 3 standard weeks. It was the largest military force assembled in over 500 years, a demonstration of power that would be remembered for generations. Send a message to the humans, Keth Voran ordered from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Let them know we are coming. Let them have time to be afraid. The message was broadcast on all frequencies. It was simple and direct, as befitting a warrior culture, to the species known as humanity. The Galactic Council has authorized your punishment. A fleet of 12,000 warships approaches your system. You have 30 standard days to surrender your colonies, dismantle your fleet, and submit to Council authority. Failure to comply will result in the complete sterilization of your homeworld. This is your only warning. On Earth, the message was received and broadcast to every major news outlet. The population was informed of the coming invasion. There was fear, as expected. There were calls for negotiation, for surrender, for anything that might save them from destruction. But in the secret bunkers beneath the surface, in the hidden bases scattered across the solar system, there was only quiet preparation. The mask would fall soon. The galaxy would learn what humanity truly was, and in her small quarters on the Council station, Ambassador Chen Wei-Lin poured herself a glass of wine and looked out at the stars. "You have no idea what you've done," she whispered to no one in particular. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed. We didn't want this. We would have been happy to remain in our corner of the galaxy, growing quietly, building peacefully. But you wouldn't let us. You had to push. You had to threaten. You had to declare war." She took a sip of the wine and smiled. "Thank you. You've just given us exactly what we needed. A reason that no one can argue with. A justification that will last for centuries. You attacked us first. Everything that comes next is on your heads. The countdown had begun. 30 days until the fleet arrived. 30 days until the galaxy learned the truth about humanity. 30 days until everything changed forever. Chen finished her wine and began drafting her official response to the Council's declaration. It would be full of fear and... Admiral Keth Voren stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominion. As his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, 12,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of humanity's sun. It was a sight that had brought countless species to their knees. The Velith-Eni fleet was legendary throughout the galaxy. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, their crews hardened by centuries of conquest. No species had ever successfully resisted them once they committed to war. Scan the system. Keth Voren ordered. Show me what the humans have prepared for us. The tactical display flickered to life, filling the air in front of him with a three-dimensional map of the Sol system. Red dots appeared to mark human ships and defensive positions. Keth Voren counted them with growing amusement. 312 ships. That was all. 312 vessels against his 12,000. And the defensive platforms around Earth were even more pathetic than the intelligence reports had suggested. Simple orbital stations with basic energy weapons, chemical missile launchers, a few plasma turrets that looked like they had been built from salvaged alien technology. They really are as primitive as we believed, said Vice Admiral Senthra, her voice dripping with contempt. This will not even be a battle. It will be an execution. Keth Voren nodded slowly, but something nagged at him. The humans had 30 days to prepare. They knew the fleet was coming. They knew they were outmatched in every possible way. And yet they had not fled. They had not surrendered. They had simply waited. Move the fleet into attack formation, he ordered. We will approach Earth in standard conquest pattern. I want all ships ready to fire on my command. The massive fleet began to move, spreading out into a formation designed to maximize firepower, while minimizing vulnerability to counterattack. It was a formation that had crushed 100 worlds as they passed the orbit of Neptune. Keth Voren noticed something strange on the tactical display. Several of the human ships were moving to intercept them, but their speed was wrong. They were traveling far faster than human technology should allow. Confirm those speed readings, he said. Confirmed, Admiral. Human vessels are traveling at 0.7 light speed. That is beyond their known capabilities. Keth Voren's eyes narrowed. How far beyond? By a factor of approximately 40, Admiral. The bridge fell silent. That was not a small error or a minor improvement. That was a fundamental leap in technology that should have taken the humans centuries to achieve. And yet there it was, displayed on their sensors. Impossible to deny. Continue the advance, Keth Voren said after a long moment. But raise shields to maximum. Something is not right here. As the fleet passed the orbit of Uranus, more anomalies began to appear. The moons of Saturn and Jupiter, which had been mapped and dismissed as barren rocks, were suddenly showing energy signatures. Massive energy signatures. Power readings that rivaled the output of Velith-Eni battle stations. Admiral, we are detecting weapons signatures from the Jovian moons. They appear to be charging some kind of energy projection system. What kind of weapons? Unknown, Admiral. The energy patterns do not match anything in our database. Keth Voren felt the first stirring of real concern. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a weapon that was not in the Velith-Eni database. They had been fighting wars across the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen everything until now. Deploy the advanced screening force, he ordered. I want to see what these weapons can do before we commit the main fleet. 500 ships broke away from the main formation and accelerated toward the inner system. They were expendable vessels, meant to test enemy defenses and draw fire before the real assault began. They never reached Earth. The first shot came from the moon called Europa. It was a beam of pure white light that crossed the distance between Jupiter and the screening force. In less than a second, it struck the lead ship and simply erased it from existence. There was no explosion, no debris, no wreckage. One moment the ship was there, and the next moment it was gone. Then more beams fired from Titan, from Ganymede, from Callisto. Each one found its target with perfect accuracy. Each one eliminated a Velathani warship as if it had never existed. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Keth Voren shouted, but there was nothing to evade. The weapons fired at light speed. By the time you saw the beam, you were already dead. In less than 3 minutes, the entire screening force was gone. 500 ships, thousands of crew members, erased. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply stared at the tactical display where 500 red dots had disappeared. "Admiral," said the sensor officer, his voice shaking, "we are detecting additional weapons signatures. The defensive platforms around Earth are powering up. And there is something else. The human ships. They are changing." On the display, the 300 human vessels were undergoing some kind of transformation. Their hulls were shifting, unfolding, revealing hidden sections that had been concealed beneath their primitive exteriors. What had looked like simple cargo transports and patrol craft were becoming something else entirely. They were becoming warships, real warships, with weapons that made Velathani technology look like toys. "How is this possible?" Vice Admiral Senthra whispered. "Our scouts have been observing them for centuries. We saw their technology. We analyzed their capabilities. They were primitive. They were weak. They lied," Keth Voren said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "They have been lying to us from the very beginning." A communication request appeared on the main screen. "Human identification codes." Keth Voren hesitated for a moment, then accepted it. The face that appeared was human, female, the ambassador he had seen at the council sessions, always sitting quietly in the back, always accepting insults with a calm smile. "Chen Wei-Lin, Admiral Keth Voren," she said, her voice pleasant and controlled. "I hope you are enjoying our welcome." "What is this?" Keth Voren demanded. "What have you done?" "We have done nothing except wait, Admiral. Wait and prepare. For 200 years, we showed you exactly what you expected to see. Primitive ships, crude weapons, a species struggling to find its place in the galaxy. And you believed it because it confirmed what you already thought about us." She leaned forward slightly, and something in her eyes changed. The diplomatic mask fell away, replaced by something harder and colder. "You thought we were weak because we did not conquer. You thought we were stupid because we did not threaten. You measured us by your own standards and found us lacking. But we are not like you, Admiral. We do not see war as the ultimate expression of power. We see it as a last resort, a terrible necessity to be avoided if possible. If you wanted to avoid war, you should not have violated the restriction accords." Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The restriction accords were designed to keep us weak and dependent. They were a collar round our neck, and you held the leash. We accepted them for 2 centuries, because fighting back then would have been costly and pointless. But we never stopped growing. We never stopped preparing. We just did it where you could not see." "Your fleet is impressive," Keth Voren admitted, "but you are still outnumbered nearly 40 to 1. Even with your hidden weapons, you cannot defeat us. Are you certain about that, Admiral? Because I do not think you understand what you are facing. Those defensive platforms around Earth that you dismissed as primitive, each one is capable of cracking a planet in half. Those slow, awkward human ships that your scouts mocked for 2 centuries, they can accelerate at speeds that would turn your crews to paste. And those soldiers on those ships, they have been training for this moment their entire lives." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You have 12,000 ships, Admiral. We have 300. But this is our home. This is our system. Every moon, every asteroid, every cubic kilometer of space has been prepared for exactly this scenario. You are not invading a primitive world. You have walked into the most heavily fortified position in the galaxy." Keth Voren studied the human on his screen, searching for signs of deception, of fear, of desperation. He found none. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly how this encounter would end. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to understand something before this goes any further. We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. For 2 centuries, we tried to find a way to coexist with the Council. We accepted your restrictions. We endured your contempt. We watched your ambassadors mock us and your soldiers threaten us. And we said nothing, because we hoped that someday you would see us as equals." Her voice hardened. But you did not want equals. You wanted subjects. And when we refused to be subjugated completely, you came to destroy us. Remember that, Admiral. You attacked us. You threatened to sterilize our homeworld. Everything that happens next is a consequence of your choices, not ours. The transmission ended. Keth Voren stood motionless for a long moment, processing what he had just learned. His entire understanding of humanity had been shattered in the space of a few minutes. The primitive species that the galaxy had dismissed for centuries was something far different than anyone had imagined. Admiral, his tactical officer said quietly, the human ships are moving into formation. They appear to. The battle began with silence. There were no war cries, no declarations, no final ultimatums. The human ships simply moved, flowing through space with a grace that seemed impossible for vessels their size. They did not charge forward in the reckless manner of primitive warriors seeking glory. Instead, they spread out in a pattern that Keth Voren's tactical officers could not identify. What formation is that? Vice Admiral Senther demanded. I have never seen anything like it. Neither had Keth Voren. In 2,000 years of warfare, the Velethani had catalogued every battle formation used by every species in the galaxy. This was something new, something designed specifically for this moment. Open fire, Keth Voren ordered. All ships, maximum firepower. Destroy them before they can close the distance. 12,000 warships unleashed their weapons at once. The space between the two fleets filled with energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile swarms. It was enough firepower to crack a continent, enough destruction to burn the atmosphere off a living world. The human ships did not try to dodge. They did not need to dodge. Shields flickered into existence around each vessel, energy barriers that glowed with a strange blue light. The Velethani weapons struck those shields and simply stopped, not deflected, not absorbed. Just stopped, as if they had hit an invisible wall that extended into some dimension that Velethani science could not comprehend. Impossible, whispered the weapons officer. Our sensors show direct hits. The energy should have penetrated their defenses. The shield technology is beyond anything we have encountered, Senther said, her voice hollow with disbelief. How did they develop this without us knowing? The answer, Keth Voren realized, was simple. They had developed it in secret, in hidden facilities, using technologies they had deliberately concealed from galactic observers. Every inspection, every diplomatic visit, every intelligence report had shown only what the humans wanted to show. The lie had been perfect, and now the truth was tearing his fleet apart. The human counterattack began with the same eerie precision that marked everything else about this battle. Their ships did not fire wildly or randomly. Each shot was calculated, targeted, and devastating. The weapons they used were unlike anything in the Velethani arsenal. Some fired beams that seemed to phase through solid matter, bypassing shields entirely to strike directly at vital systems. Others launched projectiles that moved at impossible speeds, too fast for point defense to track, too powerful for armor to stop. But the strangest thing was what those weapons targeted. They were not aiming for power cores or bridge sections. They were not trying to kill. Instead, they struck engines, weapon systems, communication arrays. They were systematically crippling the Velethani fleet without destroying it. A disabled ship drifted past the observation deck of the Eternal Dominion, its hull intact, but dark. No engines, no weapons. Life support still functioning, keeping its crew alive, but helpless. Why? Keth Voren asked aloud. Why disable when you could destroy? Admiral, we have lost control of 40% of the fleet, reported the tactical officer. Ships are being disabled faster than we can reorganize. At this rate, we will be completely neutralized within the hour. And our casualties? Minimal, Admiral. Our ships are being disabled, but very few have been destroyed. Crew losses are less than 2%. That made no sense. In war, you killed your enemies. You destroyed their capacity to fight. You made examples of them so that others would fear you. That was how the galaxy worked. That was how it had always worked. But the humans were not following those rules. They were winning the battle without committing the slaughter that victory usually required. A new communication request appeared on the screen. Keth Voren accepted it without hesitation. He needed to understand what was happening. This time, the The face on the screen was not the ambassador. It was a human male in military uniform, gray hair cut short, eyes hard but not cruel. General Marcus Stone, according to the identification tag that appeared beside his image. Admiral Keth Voran, the human, said, "I am the commander of Earth's defense forces. I think it is time we talked about how this battle ends. Your ships are impressive, but we still outnumber you. This fight is not over." "Yes, it is." Stone's voice held no arrogance, no gloating, just simple certainty. "Look at your tactical display, Admiral. Really look at it." Keth Voran turned to the display. What he saw made his heart freeze. Less than half his fleet was still combat capable. The rest were drifting, disabled, their crews alive but unable to fight. And the human ships had taken no losses at all. Not one. Their strange shields had held against everything the Velethani could throw at them. "We could destroy every ship in your fleet," Stone continued. "Our weapons are capable of it. Our positions give us complete tactical advantage. You are surrounded by defense platforms that could eliminate your remaining ships in minutes. But we do not want to do that. Then what do you want? We want you to surrender. Order your remaining ships to stand down. Allow us to complete the disabling process. And then we will talk about what happens next." Keth Voran's first instinct was to refuse. Velethani did not surrender. They fought to the death. That was their way, their honor, their identity. But as he looked at the tactical display, as he counted the disabled ships and the minimal casualties, he began to understand something that challenged everything he believed about war. The humans were offering him a way out. They were giving him the chance to preserve his fleet, his crews, his people. All he had to do was accept defeat. "If we surrender," he asked slowly, "what guarantee do we have that you will not destroy us anyway?" "None," Stone admitted. "You will have to trust us. I know that is difficult. Your species has been at war for thousands of years. Trust is not something that comes easily to warriors. But consider this, Admiral. We could have destroyed your screening force when they entered the system. Instead, we eliminated them quickly and cleanly, without making them suffer. We could have killed your crews when we disabled your ships. Instead, we left life support intact. Every action we have taken in this battle has been designed to defeat you without slaughtering you. Why?" The question burned in Keth Voran's mind. "Why show mercy to enemies who came to destroy your world?" Stone's expression shifted, becoming something that Keth Voran could not quite read. Sadness, perhaps, or something deeper. "Because we learned something long ago, Admiral. Something that your species never had the chance to learn. We spent 10,000 years killing each other. Wars without end. Genocides, atrocities. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over. And when we finally stopped, when we finally united, we made a choice. We decided that we would never again kill unless we had no other option. Not because we are weak, not because we cannot fight, but because we know where that road leads." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You came here to teach us a lesson about power. Let us teach you a lesson instead. True strength is not the ability to destroy. True strength is the ability to destroy and choose not to. To win a battle without creating a generation of orphans and widows. To defeat an enemy and leave them capable of becoming a friend." Keth Voran stood in silence as the words washed over him. In 2,000 years of warfare, no one had ever spoken to him like this. No one had ever suggested that there was another way around him. His remaining ships continued to be disabled one by one. Precise shots that crippled without killing. Surgical strikes that ended resistance without ending lives. He thought of the crews on those ships. Thousands of Velethani warriors, fully expecting to die in battle. Now drifting helplessly in the void. Alive, confused, but alive. "If I order surrender," he said finally, "what happens to my people? We will send medical teams to assist with any wounded. We will provide supplies to ships whose systems have been damaged. And when this is over, we will return everyone to Velethani space. No prisoners, no hostages, just defeated soldiers going home to their families." It was impossible. It violated every principle of war that Keth Voran had ever known. And yet, looking at the evidence before him, he could not deny that it was real. The humans had won, completely and utterly, and they were choosing to win without cruelty. "All ships," Keth Voran said. his voice heavy with a defeat that felt strangely like something else. "Stand down. Lower weapons. Prepare to receive human boarding parties." He turned back to the screen where Stone waited. "We surrender, General. May your ancestors have mercy on us for our failure." Stone nodded slowly. "There is no failure in survival, Admiral, and there is no shame in losing to an enemy who fights fairly. Stand by. Our teams are on their way." This battle is over. The transmission ended, and Keth Voren stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he thought he understood about war. The humans had beaten him, not through savagery or overwhelming destruction, but through precision, restraint, and a philosophy of warfare that he had never imagined could exist. And somehow, impossibly, he was still alive to wonder what it meant. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 850 species sat in stunned silence as Ambassador Chen Weilin walked to the central speaking platform. She moved with the same calm dignity she had always shown, but something was different now. She no longer walked like a representative of a weak and primitive species, begging for scraps of respect. She walked like someone who had already won, and was simply deciding what to do with her victory. High Chancellor Vethmaker watched her approach with eyes that held a mixture of fear and disbelief. The reports from the Sol system had arrived hours ago, spreading through the Council like wildfire. 12,000 Velith Any warships disabled, hundreds of thousands of warriors captured and then released unharmed. The most powerful military force in the galaxy, defeated without losing a single human ship. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. Ambassador Chen, Vethmaker said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "You requested this address. The Council recognizes you." Chen stepped onto the platform and looked out at the assembled representatives. Many of them refused to meet her gaze. Others stared at her with open hostility, or fear, or something that might have been the beginning of respect. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. 47 standard hours ago, you voted to authorize military action against my homeworld. The vote was 847 to 0, with 3 abstentions. Not a single species spoke in our defense. Not one. She paused, letting the weight of that fact settle over the assembly. The Velith Any fleet arrived in our system, expecting an easy victory. They found something very different. And now you are all wondering the same thing. What happens next? Will humanity take revenge? Will we become the new conquerors? Will we do to you what you tried to do to us? The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the clicking and humming of alien communication had stopped. Every being present was focused on the small human woman at the center of it all. Let me answer that question with another question. Why do you think we hid our true capabilities for centuries? We had the technology to challenge you decades ago. We could have fought for our freedom at any time, but we did not. We endured your restrictions. We accepted your contempt. We let you believe we were weak. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of representatives from species that had mocked humanity for generations. We did this because we were waiting, not for military advantage, not for the right moment to strike. We were waiting to see if there was any hope that you could change, any chance that the galaxy could accept us as equals without us having to force that acceptance. Through violence, her voice hardened slightly. You had 200 years to treat us with basic dignity, 200 years to see past your assumptions about primitive species and recognize what we might become. Instead, you tightened your restrictions. You limited our expansion. You denied us the basic rights that you grant to species far younger than ours. And when we finally refused to accept those chains, you voted to destroy us. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data crystal. This contains information that your ancestors tried very hard to bury. It is the reason why humanity was really quarantined centuries ago. It is the secret that the founders of the Council hoped would never come to light. Vethmaker leaned forward in his seat. What information? When your first scout ships discovered Earth, they also discovered something else. The ruins of a civilization that had existed in our solar system millions of years before humanity evolved. That civilization left behind a single message, encoded in a format that took your scientists decades to decipher. Chen held up the crystal. The message was a warning. It spoke of a species that would one day arise on the third planet of our system, a species unlike any other in the galaxy, not because of their technology, not because of their biology, but because of their nature. She turned to face the Chancellor directly. The warning said that this species would be capable of both the greatest destruction and the greatest creation the galaxy had ever seen. It said that their potential was unlimited, for good or for evil, and it said that how they develop would depend entirely on how they were treated by those who found them first. The hall erupted in murmurs and whispers. Representatives turned to each other, confusion and alarm spreading through the assembly. Your founders had a choice, Chen continued, raising her voice above the noise. They could have welcomed us. They could have helped us grow. They could have shaped our development through friendship and cooperation. Instead, they chose fear. They decided to contain us, to limit us, to keep us weak and dependent in hopes that we would never become the threat that the ancient warning described. She shook her head slowly. They made the wrong choice. By treating us as prisoners, they ensured that we would eventually develop in secret. By denying us equality, they guaranteed that we would one day have to take it by force. The very actions they took to prevent the warning from coming true are what made it come true. What do you want? Vethmaker demanded. Territory, resources, control of the council? I want you to understand something, Chancellor. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to replace one system of domination with another. We had centuries to develop in isolation, and we used that time to ask ourselves a fundamental question. What kind of species do we want to be? She walked to the edge of the platform, looking out at the sea of alien faces. We decided that we do not want to rule. We do not want empires or subjects or slaves. We want something much harder to achieve. We want to be part of a galaxy where every species is truly equal, where strength is used to protect, not to dominate, where differences are celebrated rather than feared. Pretty words, sneered Representative Vexitha of the Morvani Collective. But you have just demonstrated that you are more powerful than all of us combined. How can we trust that you will not use that power against us? You cannot, Chen admitted. Not yet. Trust has to be earned through actions, not words. So let me tell you what actions humanity will take. She began to list them, each point landing like a stone in still water. First, we will return every captured Velith-Any soldier to their home world. No ransom, no conditions. They came to destroy us, and we will send them home to their families. Second, we will share the technology that allowed us to defeat you, not as a weapon, but as a tool. Energy systems that could end poverty on 100 worlds. Medical advances that could extend lifespans and cure diseases. Technologies we developed while you thought we were struggling to build basic spacecraft. Third, we will dismantle the restriction accords and every other treaty that treats any species as lesser than another. The galaxy will be reorganized on the principle of true equality, not because we demand it, but because we will demonstrate that it works. The council representatives were staring at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to hope to suspicion. This was not how conquered species behaved. This was not how conquerors behaved. This was something entirely new. Why? Asked a voice from the middle rows. It belonged to a small, insectoid being whose species had been under Velith-Any protection for centuries. Why would you give so much to those who tried to destroy you? Chen smiled, and for the first time, there was warmth in it. Because we learned something that your ancient warning got wrong. It said that humanity could be a force for great destruction or great creation. It implied that we were dangerous, unpredictable, something to be feared. But the warning missed the most important thing about us. She looked up at the massive dome above them, at the artificial stars that represented thousands of worlds. We are capable of destruction. We proved that today. But we are also capable of something that destruction can never achieve. We are capable of choosing. Every moment of every day, we can choose who we want to be. We can choose vengeance or forgiveness. We can choose domination or cooperation. We can choose fear or hope. Her voice rang through the silent hall. Today, humanity chooses hope. We choose to believe that this galaxy can be better than it has been. We choose to believe that species who have been enemies for millennia can become friends. We choose to believe that power is not just for wielding, but for sharing. She stepped down from the platform. The restriction accords are void. The attack on Earth has failed, and from this moment forward, humanity takes its place as a full member of the Galactic Council. Not above you, not below you, beside you. And if we refuse? Vethmaker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chen turned to face him one last time. Then we will wait. As we have waited for 200 years. We will keep building, keep growing, keep hoping. And eventually, you will see that we mean what we say. We are not your enemies, Chancellor. We never wanted to be. We only wanted to be your equals. She began to walk toward the exit. The choice, as it has always been, is yours. The doors closed behind her, leaving the Galactic Council to contemplate a future that none of them had ever imagined possible. A future where the weakest species in the galaxy had become the strongest and had chosen to use that strength for something other than conquest. A future where everything was about to change. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Sol. Admiral Keth Voren stood on a balcony overlooking the newly constructed Galactic Unity Center, watching ships from 100 different species dock at its gleaming ports. The building itself was a symbol of everything that had changed since that fateful day, when his fleet had entered human space expecting an easy victory. Human architects had designed it, but every species had contributed to its construction. Velethani engineers had built the structural framework. Morvani artists had created the massive murals that decorated its walls. Even the small insectoid Cathari, who had been little more than servants under the old order, had contributed their unique crystalline materials to the windows. It was beautiful, and it was something that could never have existed under the old council. You come here often, said a voice behind him. Keth Voren turned to see General Marcus Stone approaching. The human commander had changed little in 3 years. His hair was perhaps a bit grayer, his movements a bit slower, but his eyes still held that strange combination of hardness and warmth that Keth Voren had first seen on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. I find it helps me think, Keth Voren admitted. Much has changed since we last met on the battlefield. Much has changed for everyone. Stone joined him at the railing, looking out at the same view. The Velethani Empire has reduced its military by 60%. Worlds that spent centuries preparing for war are building schools and hospitals instead. Your people are becoming something new, as are yours. Keth Voren gestured toward a distant section of the complex where human and Velethani soldiers trained together. I never thought I would see my warriors learning from those they once considered primitive, and I never thought I would see human soldiers teaching combat techniques to the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Stone smiled slightly. Strange times. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the activity below. Beings of every shape and size moved through the complex, working together on projects that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. I have been meaning to ask you something, Keth Voren said finally. A question that has haunted me since the battle. Ask. You had everything. Your technology was superior. Your positions were perfect. You could have destroyed my entire fleet in minutes, killed hundreds of thousands of my people, and sent a message that would have terrified the galaxy into submission. It would have been the rational choice, the safe choice. Why did you not take it? Stone was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Do you know how humanity became what it is today? I have read the histories. Your species was divided for most of its existence. Tribes, nations, empires, all fighting for dominance. That is the simple version. The truth is harder to explain. Stone turned to face the Velethani admiral. We nearly destroyed ourselves. Multiple times. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, climate disasters caused by our own carelessness. Each time, we came to the edge of extinction and somehow pulled back just in time. But you survived, barely. And each time we survived, we learned something. We learned that victory through destruction is not really victory. It is just a pause before the next war. We learned that enemies who are humiliated become enemies who plot revenge. We learned that the only way to truly end a conflict is to give your opponent a reason to stop fighting. He looked out at the Unity Center again. When we finally united as a species, we made a promise to ourselves. No more wars of conquest. No more enemies destroyed just because we had the power to destroy them. If we had to fight, we would fight to win. But winning would mean creating peace, not just silence. A beautiful philosophy, Kethvorin said. But surely there are those who would take advantage of such mercy. Species who would see your restraint as weakness. Some do. And when they push too far, they discover that our mercy has limits. We will always defend ourselves and those under our protection. But defense is not the same as revenge, and protection is not the same as domination. Kethvorin considered this. In 2,000 years of warfare, such concepts had never been part of Velethani thinking. War was absolute. Victory meant the complete subjugation or destruction of the enemy. Any other outcome was seen as failure. And yet here he stood, a defeated admiral who had been shown mercy, working alongside the very humans who had beaten him. His people were not subjugated. They were not destroyed. They were changing, evolving, becoming something different, something better, perhaps. There is something else I must tell you, Stone said. Something I did not reveal during the negotiations. What? We knew about the ancient warning, the one the council founders discovered. We found records of it in the ruins your ancestors tried to bury. Kethvorin stiffened. You knew. Before the battle? Long before. We discovered the ruins early in our development, before we even made contact with the council. Our scientists spent decades studying them, learning about the civilization that had left the warning. And what did you learn? Stone smiled, but there was something deep and complicated in his expression. We learned that the warning was a test, not a prediction, not a curse, a test. That ancient civilization had seen something in humanity's potential. They knew we could become conquerors or liberators, destroyers or builders. So they left a warning designed to see which path we would choose. I do not understand. If the warning made the council treat us badly, and we responded with vengeance and conquest, we would prove that we were indeed the threat the warning described. But if we responded with restraint and mercy, if we chose to forgive those who wronged us instead of destroying them, we would prove something else entirely. What? That the warning was wrong. That humanity was not a danger to be feared, but a hope to be embraced. That we had learned from our own violent history and become something different. Kethvorin stood in stunned silence as the implications sank in. The battle, he said slowly. The mercy you showed. It was all part of proving this, not proving. Choosing, every moment. We had the choice to respond differently. We could have destroyed your fleet. We could have demanded submission. We could have become exactly what the council feared we would become. Instead, we chose another path. And what path is that? Stone looked at him directly, human eyes meeting Velethani eyes. The path that leads here. To this place. To you and me standing together as something other than enemies. To a galaxy that is changing because one species decided that being powerful was not as important as being good. A group of young beings walked past below, students from multiple species on their way to some class or lecture. They were laughing together, joking in a mixture of languages, completely comfortable in each other's presence. That is what we wanted, Stone said quietly. Not fear, not submission, not even respect in the way the council understood it. We wanted what you see down there. Beings from across the galaxy learning to see each other as friends rather than threats. A future where the next generation does not grow up preparing for wars that we have already proven do not need to happen. You wanted friendship, Kethvorin said. Finally understanding, we wanted a chance to earn it. And you gave us that chance when you surrendered instead of fighting to the death. Your people gave us that chance when they accepted our offer of cooperation, instead of demanding revenge. Every species that chose to work with us instead of against us has given us that chance. Kethvorin was quiet for a long time, processing everything he had heard. His entire worldview had been built on assumptions that now seemed childish and limited. Strength meant dominance. Power meant control. Victory meant the destruction of enemies. But standing here, looking at a future that his ancestors could never have imagined, he saw a different kind of strength, a different kind of power, a different kind of victory. I have one more question, he said finally. Ask. If we had not surrendered, if we had fought to the death as our traditions demanded, what would you have done? Stone's expression grew somber. We would have defeated you. We would have disabled every ship, captured every soldier, and won the battle just as completely as we did. And then we would have sent everyone home anyway. Because the outcome was never about what you chose, Admiral. It was always about what we chose. Whether you surrendered or fought to the last warrior, we were always going to offer mercy. Why? Because mercy is not a reward for good behavior. It is a statement of who you are. We chose to be the species that offers second chances. The species that believes enemies can become friends. The species that knows strength without wisdom is just savagery with better weapons. He turned to face Kethvorin fully. The galaxy feared us for centuries because they thought we might become conquerors. Now they are beginning to understand that we want something much harder. We want to be partners. We want to be teachers. We want to be the species that helps others become their best selves, not the species that forces others to submit. And that, Kethvorin said slowly, is what Earth finally got. Exactly. Not conquest. Not an empire. Something better. Stone gestured at the Unity Center, at the students and diplomats and scientists working together below. This is what we were waiting for. Not the battle, not the victory, but what comes after. The chance to build something together would be